So come meeting to order. Everyone's here. Steve is via Zoom. And first thing on the agenda is the 2021 Vermont Transco equity offers. And I think we can let Meredith start with that and let the rest of the board know what that is, what it's about, what it means, and turn it over to our guru. Explain whatever questions we have.
Sounds good. Thanks, Will. So I emailed you folks a little bit, just a summary, but usually once a year, sometimes more often, there's the ability for the utilities throughout the state to purchase Transco equity, which is the interest in the state's transmission system. And it's typical in my whole time with the village has elected to assign our units to VEPSA, which means that VEPSA actually finances the purchase, so we don't have to put our own cash out. And there's obviously a financing fee for that, but we still are able then to take advantage of a return on investment from that investment in the transmission system. So this is the December 2021 offer, and our share is approximately $94,000 worth of units. So the first question for the trustees is whether or not we want to purchase those units and whether or not we want to assign them to VEPSA, which has historically been what we do, so we don't have to put our own cash out on the table. Then the second question is, as I mentioned, I believe both Stowe and the town of Hyde Park, or Village of Hyde Park, excuse me, have elected not to purchase the units that are available to them, which means that the rest of Vermont utilities have the ability to oversubscribe and purchase additional units. I asked VEPSA what they anticipate our share of those would be, assuming that everybody who's left wants their share, and it would be about, she said, under $5,000 worth of additional units. So, all told, it would think would be less than $100,000 investment. As a reminder, the general return on investment is 12.5% minus the financing fee. So we've always found it to be a good deal for the village. I think because I can't speak for Stowe and Hyde Park, but they are not VEPSA members, so they don't have the advantage of having another entity do the financing piece. So unlike us, it would be a direct outlay of, taking on debt or taking on, a cash outlay. So I can't speak to the reason why they're not taking theirs, but I think we'd certainly have the advantage of being able to assign ours to VEPSA and get the benefit without that immediate cash outlay.
So perfect timing, Meredith. You phased out exactly what you said. The additional share would cost how much, and it went wrong. So
okay. Yep. Sorry. So VEPSA indicated that they anticipate the additional share that if we elected to take on more would be less than $5,000. So the total, if we took both what we have directly available to us plus the oversubscription, taking on what we can get of Hyde Park and Stowe's, would be, I'd say, less than $100,000 total.
Okay. All right.
Hopefully that was clear.
It was to me. We want to let, I'm sorry, I forget your name, but the guy from VEPSA speak, or only there to answer questions if we have them, or?
I don't think there's anybody from VEPSA on the call.
Oh, okay. All right, I was mistaken. So, okay, does anybody have any questions for Meredith on what this is about, as far as historically we've taken the shares, the equity shares, and now I'm not aware of anywhere where it turned out to be a bad that decision. Okay. Yeah, so historically, it's a pretty safe bet.
Why did somebody like Stowe withdraw from buying units? Why would somebody do that? Or Hyde Park? Why do they? Because they historically purchased and they don't now.
So I certainly can't speak to their decision-making, but as I said, a guess would be, unlike our ability to finance through VEPSA, this would be a decision where they would have to actually put the money up themselves. I think in Stowe's case, it's, over $500,000. So that either be a direct, cash out of their pocket or taking on debt that they may just not want to do for whatever reason. Again, I don't know the reasoning, but that would be my guess. That just not the right time for them to make that sort of decision.
They are not members of that, so right?
Correct.
That answer your question?
Yeah, and so the $94,000, I don't think I understand that quote. Can you explain that a little bit more?
What do you?
So-
Are you?
What do you want to about?
So is it, we're purchasing $94,000 worth, or do we have, that's what we're doing, right? We're
Yeah.
purchasing $94,000 worth of units.
Yeah, basically stock, right? Meredith?
Correct.
More or
Yep.
less,
Yeah, it's an interest in the Transco transmission system. Yep.
So, and actually what we're doing is we're authorizing VEPSA to purchase it in our name. They take on the debt load. And then there's a fee at the return, they get a fee for their service, the being the ones who are paying out there. And we get whatever the amount of their price is. And there's an additional little under $5,000 available because of Hyde Park and stuff.
That's correct.
On top of the 94, so we're at 99,000.
Yeah.
Do we need a motion for this one?
Yes, we would.
So I'd motion that we allow VEPSA to purchase the 94,000 and the 5,000 extra shares in our name. I'll second.
I get a motion and a second to authorize VEPSA to purchase the Transco equity, Vermont Transco equity shares. And a second, do we have any discussion?
Yes, I'm wondering, for clarity in the motion, do you want to say like any extra shares that are available or up to a certain amount or?
So Meredith, is that 5,000 a pretty sort of around 5,000 a solid number?
Yeah, I think if you want to put a cap on it of 5,000, that would be fine.
Okay,
Could you hear me?
you want to amend that to? Yeah, we did, thank you.
Okay.
Or any extra was.
Right, but you want to put a dollar figure on it though. So you said 5,000 is pretty good cap, so you can say up to 5,000
So I would, yes, I'd amend it to be up to 5,000.
in a second. You okay with that amendment? Okay. So with that. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of said motion signify with an eye.
Aye.
There you go, Steve. And that's chair as an aye as well, so that's unanimous. So moved. Okay, where we at now? All right, so next item on the agenda is the garage assessment report. And I would love to start with Meredith with your thoughts and position on this.
Sure, I can give a brief introduction, let's kick it off, and then as I mentioned, Tom Peterson is here to talk about it a little bit more, answer any questions you have. But my takeaway from it, trying to just sort of drill right down to summarize it, is that the ability to reuse the structure is not completely off the table, but it would require a lot more engineering and investigation to determine, exactly what's going on under the slab and how that could be prevented in the future. And that there's a very high likelihood that I think the slab would have to be torn out in order to solve the problem. So to me, the takeaway was it probably, if we can spend a lot of money to go down that road and do that investigation and figure out some of the moisture issues and the slab issues and how to prevent that from happening going forward. Or we could sort of regroup and try and do an analysis to find a location where it may be better suited. The conditions may be better for the garage going forward. That's really my very quick summation of how I read that report. I guess I'll turn it over to Tom, the one who wrote it, to say did I summarize that properly?
I think that's a reasonable summary, Meredith. I guess the only thing I would add is that I would add the caveat that is what you said is really considering whether if the building was to be reused as an occupied space,
Right.
a conditioned occupied space, then it would need some, like you said, engineering and further investigation. It would take less engineering and less investigation and probably less upfront money to reuse the structure for a different use that's not conditioned occupied space.
Because there are elements of the building, like the metal structure, and the pad itself is not cracked and deteriorated to the point of not being usable. It's the concern that the moisture is coming up through it, which is contributing to the mold and the issues with being in the building. So I think Tom rightly points out that there are potential uses of the building that wouldn't require quite the same level of engineering. He did point out correctly, though, that no matter what, we have to deal with the remediation of what's there and removing the mold material and all of that. So that's not avoidable, sort of whatever path we go down.
Okay.
If we did do another building, another spot, we can still use that as storage and stuff, right?
Yeah. So,
Then the slab's going to last 2 years. Big cold storage.
It's a complete goal. I think so. I think that he's had it after we purchased it. So, all right. So I've got to be honest. I perused the report. I did not read every word, but and I apologize for that. But life happens. So you're a quick analysis of what you reported is that obviously we got moisture around the building. The building was not intended to be heated. So that in itself, with my knowledge of construction, says that creates an issue to begin with. So you're indicating that there's moisture coming up through the slab is one of your sources of the moisture. Is that true?
That's my belief, but it's a belief based on experience and observation and not on any specific testing. So
Okay. I mean, because of your experience, so we'll take that. Now, here's another question for you. With your experience and stuff like that, is it possible to take an existing slab, put a barrier in, and pour a slab over the top of it to prevent anything coming up through the current slab? Is that an option?
let me repeat your question to make sure I got it right, because the sound on this end is not real clear. It sounded like I believe you asked if it's possible to create some kind of a barrier and pour a new slab over the old slab and prevent moisture from migrating up through the old slab and into a new slab and into the building.
Correct.
I think that's a question for an engineer. I am not an engineer. So I can't honestly tell you if that's possible or not. My gut feeling is that even if it might be possible, it's probably very expensive and probably dicey. I don't I don't know that it would be something that's done very often. And I would guess that it would be more of an experimental thing.
So that's the question. The answer to the question is out of your experience in Purdue. Then
I'm sorry, it was breaking up. I'm
the answer to the question I asked is out of your wheelhouse, out of your experience level.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a practical solution, but I think an engineer would be able to determine that better than I.
Okay. So secondly, obviously the way that the interior was insulated and without any kind of air exchange or moisture exchange in the building would be in your opinion the primary source of the of another major source of the cause of the moisture remaining in the building, as well as giving a hole for the mold to grow. Would that be a basic assessment of what your report says?
Well, again, I'll see if I can paraphrase your question, because it's really breaking up badly. I can't hear every word, but it sounded like you're asking if the insulation is contributing to the moisture problem. Maybe that's not exactly what you asked, but conditioning the space with heat and insulation, I think, would help to trap any moisture that gets into the building. Is going to have a way to stay in the building at that point. Maybe not as standing water or as visible moisture, but as high humidity and enough moisture to support mold growth.
And Tom, he asked about the absence of any sort of air handling, ventilation system as well.
That's contributing. I think air handling, like air-to-air heat exchanger or heat recovery ventilator, that could help. But I think it would still. I think there are a lot of things that could help. I mean, we could all sit around and make a list of ideas of things that might help this building to be able to be continued to be used. But the question I think I would advise the board to ask themselves is, do you want to do this as a science experiment, or do you want to have it planned out? And that's why I'm recommending engineering to really evaluate any possible solutions that you can think of. Get them on the table with an engineer, especially somebody who's experienced with building science, to really get a good feel for whether the ideas on the table are going to be feasible.
Okay, so basically this report doesn't do nothing again right now.
He gave us a couple other solutions, like you said, with the air scrubbers and stuff, and then explained that the plywood's probably very bad to be having in there, because that does conduce.
But we kind of already knew that too.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a lot of the basic information, which was pretty much knowledgeable anyway. But
And then the water coming off the bank on the backside.
Yeah.
Which we
so
had there.
I mean, there's got to be alternative solutions, because you put up metal buildings. Just put up a 10,000 square foot building. It's heated, air conditioned.
It's metal. It's a metal frame on metal.
So a lot of it, in my opinion, was it wasn't ventilated properly to begin with, so it was modified, and it's a great idea. Let's just stuff insulation tight, but we all know that's not a good idea.
I'll just add in that,
But air would Go ahead, Meredith, sorry.
Okay, so, what I found helpful, particularly from the report was, Troy and I, have been talking about this problem for over a year, trying to figure out, is it something that we can just make a few small changes and keep everything in the building and, solve it, remediate it, put it back, and feel confident that that was a wise use of money. And based on the conversations I've had with Tom and his report, to me, that seems like it's off the table. It seems like we have to spend more money to understand what would need to be done to make this not happen again going forward. I mean, that's really the goal. We know that we could remediate the building, put in an air handling system, and that would help. But until we know where, if there really is, a stream of water underneath the pad and how to prevent that from happening going forward, that would be throwing good money after bad. So I felt it was very helpful to hear somebody from the outside saying, no, you really do need to spend, more money with an engineer if your intent is to see if you can reuse that existing structure. Or if you're willing to repurpose that existing structure, then the next step would be picking probably 2 sites to evaluate for a new location. It clarified for me that, it's not remediate and put in some nicer, units and better air handling. It's an engineering work to see what would take to reuse the building.
I think you got it. You got it right, Meredith. I don't think there is a small fix here.
Tom?
And I would agree with both of you on that, I don't think it's gonna be a $10,000 fix. We're gonna be able to throw in an air heat exchanger, call it good. Obviously what's there is gonna be removed. As Kenny pointed out, I mean, metal buildings with metal girders and metal siding are put up every damn day this, in the state, and they don't have this problem. So what we gotta do is we gotta find out why they don't have a problem and we do. And what's gonna take to what additions to that building is it gonna take to make it so it isn't where it's at now. We gotta do it now. And if you're recommending the next step is to hire an engineer to find out, why this building isn't performing as every other metal building in the state should, and Meredith agrees, I mean, I think that's going to be our next step. But I'd love to hear from Steve and the rest of the board and get your opinions on what you think our next step is.
Yeah, Will? Hello?
Yep.
This report really confirmed my gut suspicion that we'd be better off just starting from scratch with a new site, assuming that there's one available, and that if there's water coming up through the ledge and the ledge extends way up behind the building, that's going to be a kind of an expensive and maybe futile proposition to try to dry that site out properly.
Yeah, I agree that there are metal buildings being put up all over the country and in all kinds of climates, including Vermont, and they're conditioned spaces. Some of the metal buildings that are going up are nearly net zero and perfectly healthy, efficient buildings. But this building, when it was designed and built, wasn't designed to be a conditioned, dry, healthy, occupied building. It was designed basically to be a covered pole barn. I mean, when you're building something that's just basically a shed, you don't necessarily worry about putting a vapor barrier down under the slab or putting proper drainage around the perimeter of the foundation. And I think that's what they did when they built it, is they left those parts out.
I haven't explored the concrete over there myself personally, but obviously you have. So what is the condition of the current slab? I mean, other than the possibility of moisture coming up through it, is there heaves, is there cracks, is there unsettled areas that are the hydraulics of the water underneath it creating a problem.
The surface of the slab, the bits that I could see that weren't covered by equipment or material storage, it was in excellent shape. It wasn't, there wasn't significant spalling. I didn't see any major cracks or heaving or gaps, or, you know, it was actually in really good shape.
Okay. Condition of water underneath the slab is not a big issue. That's been sitting there heated on for 2 decades. That, I mean, hydraulics is going to take and lift that slab if that's an issue.
Especially when it was unheated.
Right.
So, but I mean, the slab stays warm, so you know, stay warm. It's not going to frost heat. It's not going to ice up under it.
Right. But the hydraulics of that,
Absolutely.
if the water coming out of that ledge is an issue. When you take the red barn behind Siegel's Antiques there,
Yep.
you know, they told the hydraulics there, and they ended up having to ditch that because it was actually the slab after they poured it.
Yeah.
So, but this has been here for 2 decades.
But even with drainage, you do like a French drain around the outside. And that
I mean,
would help
it
out.
definitely,
I just I'm not sure if it's moving underneath the slab, but my you know, my Vermont redneck intuition is telling me that if that slab is in perfect condition, that's not an issue. I'm not saying there's not moisture coming through it, but I'm just saying that the water moving underneath it's not going to be a major engineering feat to divert water, because it's
nope, I think that's definitely a possibility. Easily dry it up around it with, you know, excavation, removing ledge, proper drainage. And I think we definitely should take his opinion on the engineer just for that purpose, because it makes, you know what I mean? How far up is the reservoir?
good.
Can't be that far up from there, is it? That big tank? I mean, it's not very far up behind there when I work there, so. But that, you know, and that's where we're getting a lot of water, so. I definitely feel that a lot of them being intended to be an unheated building and then retrofitting without proper engineering for vapor barrier on the walls and the ceiling and ventilation of the ceiling, you know, as you would with proper vent in a normal house. They do very similar things in the steel buildings, so.
Well, having this person come in and check, and maybe they'll tell us if it'd be worth it to gut it and build it. I mean, and build the inside with all the way areas, right?
Absolutely,
Or
that's
we need
what,
to
that's what the
replace.
engineers would need to do, is to come up with, okay, this is what you could do to fix the inside by gutting it, vapor barriering it, retroing it to be up to standards to not produce moisture. Or they're gonna say it's gonna cost you just as much
To do a new build.
to do a new building, but it's gonna take us 4 times longer, because then we're in all the Act 50, new site planning, engineers anyway, wastewater runoff.
So next
The
step
list
is
goes on.
get an engineer.
So if we keep the same footprint, the village is out of the situation 10 times faster.
Right.
If it's feasible that the slab isn't the issue.
Yeah.
You know, and that probably is definitely an engineer involved, because they're gonna wanna excavate under the side, check what's under the slab, see if there's insulation in the vapor barrier. If there isn't, as you said, that could be a problem, but I believe there is a very easy solution with a vapor barrier and another slab on top.
So it wouldn't have to be a full 6-inch slab.
They probably would, just to make sure that it's not gonna get anything in between it. They'd go probably 6-inch, like you said, of high strength concrete, because you're sitting on top of something else that can get stuff in there.
So-
For the entrance, you're gonna bring the elevation up.
So let's get, that would be the next step.
But the engineers definitely, no matter which way we go, he's correct, an engineer should be involved.
So, but is it worth? So Meredith, I'm gonna kind of call on you for a second here. Or what? How much money are we talking about to hire an engineer, a site, and just give us a, you know, they get to a point like, no, screw this, this is not worth moving forward, or give us a plan to say, you know, to use that building as a permanent site. I mean, we talking 5,000 or 50,000? I mean, is there a range there where either one of you guys would think that you can throw a number at? I mean, obviously it's not a bid process. We're just looking for best guess to kind of set us on our direction.
I'll go with yes, in between exactly what you said.
Yeah, I definitely say it's not 5,000. I think depending on what they find, it could be 50. You know, I think the risk that Tom was trying to point out is that we can put a lot of money into, you know, hiring an engineer to do this investigation, and the answer could be it's not feasible to, you know, dry out the site, or if it can be done, but it would be fabulously expensive, and you're better off, you know, moving somewhere else. So I think if we are going to go down the path of hiring an engineer to do that work, I think we all just need to be aware that it may result in we abandon that site as a feasible option, and it may not be, but I think we just need to be aware that we're going to be putting that money in, knowing that that may not be the solution.
Yeah.
But I do think $30,000 would not be a crazy number. Tom, does that, it's been a long time since I've hired an engineer for that sort of work.
Yeah, I think it could be less than that, but it depends a little bit on what their initial assessment is and what they would recommend for testing. I would think if I was in the engineer's shoes, I would want to do a core of the slab, drill down through the slab to the substrate under the slab and see what's there. Possibly even drill into the earth in that core sample and see where the water table is under the building. Just to get a sense of really what's there. So I think the cost of the engineering really depends on how much testing they would recommend. I think it could be less than 30. And you could probably do it in a what we would call an iterative fashion. So you get an engineer in for some initial testing for a fixed fee, and then discuss the results of that testing and decide whether you want to keep going forward with more testing or not. So you wouldn't have to go all in right from the start.
Part of the, Scott's joining us. Now, if we're looking at a new site, obviously we do on land that we currently have, with the town, and they're okay with it. The land itself is already owned by the taxpayers.
It is, sorry, I missed that.
I was gonna say, if we do it at that site, we do it on the land we already have. We still got all the expenses that go with a new building. A building that size, I'm not familiar with per foot prices, but we're looking at 600,000.
Yeah, at least.
I mean, would you, either one of you care to kind of throw your estimate in on a building that size from new just to the construction? I mean, 600 grand, isn't that in the ballpark?
Yeah, that doesn't sound unreasonable to me.
No, no, not with today's pricing. I don't think that's, if you build a building that same size, it's 4,800 square feet. That comes out to $125 a square foot. And granted, it maybe only needs one bathroom and not a real sophisticated heating system and so forth if it's a fairly basic building. But I think you'd be hard pressed to build a building for $125 a square foot. We're involved with.
I mean, obviously today, the construction field has gone absolutely insane. What's your thoughts on per square foot price that you think would be reasonable?
I think a safer bet, and it may not even be all that safe, but around $200 a square foot. We're involved in several projects right now where we're project managing them, and we're just seeing unbelievable escalation that we haven't seen in my career. I haven't seen this kind of escalation in costs. there's a building that we're helping to plan and manage, a new construction in Milton. That is upwards of $300 a square foot, or a little over $300 a square foot. That one is much more sophisticated building. It's a big steel building, but there's a lot of sophisticated mechanicals inside it because it has some specialty manufacturing going on. But that's the kind of range we're talking about, is getting up into that kind of cost per square foot.
So, okay, so looking at that, now Meredith, there was a, some sort of a, grant or loan, thing you were looking at that might possibly, that building might qualify for. Is that only for new construction? Is that for remediation? Is that, I mean, obviously, we can't hold you to it because you're not the people who hold the purse strings, but what's your interpretation of that?
My sense in talking with folks from USDA is that it could be used for a reconstruction or a new building. I had a follow-up conversation since our last meeting with the local Vermont-based rep for that program. And, I don't think it's realistic that we would know enough about exactly what we want to do or the costs by mid-December. She did let me know that there's another ability to apply in April. So that might be a more realistic target to shoot for. I also had, I got some information back from Act 250. I think anything that we do at the site would need at a minimum an administrative amendment to let them know, what we're up to. And then if we start doing actual, digging in the ground, that would either trigger a minor or major amendment for the existing permit. And so I think if we're doing any sort of site work for, drainage, or if we end up having to do something with the slab, or if we're putting a new building in an entirely new site on that parcel, that definitely would trigger an Act 250 amendment. And I also have reached out to the folks who oversee some of the environmental research on that property. And there definitely would be some process to go through. It's not entirely figured out if we're going to start digging in other parts of that parcel. So I think all of that goes into saying, I think April is a much more realistic timeframe to figure all of this out. And it's unfortunate because I think if we apply in April, we probably wouldn't hear for a few months. So that may put us out of, it could push our construction past the summer, and, construction is never very much fun in the fall and winter, but I don't see us having a good enough understanding of the cost and exactly what the project is by mid-December.
Right. I'm gonna go to Scott. So you've been over there. Yeah. The materials that are there, they're inside, they were contaminated. It's mold and whatever else is there. What kind of process would it be to get rid of those materials? Like there's the Powerhouse Bridge where we got, something's got to be sealed up and hauled away and buried in Timbuktu. This is not that kind of situation, but in my opinion doesn't count as a state that those people think. So, is this something that can be taken to the local?
As far as what, the moldy product?
Yeah.
That's gonna be all in order to remediate. They're gonna bag it.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying that, we kind of got to understand from where we're sitting right here going, okay, we're just going to take and throw it into a seller's bin and it's going to get shipped up to Newport, or is this that could be bagged and shipped out to freaking Montana or something,
No, I believe any mold related products are kept in state. That's nothing. As soon as you throw your wood into the pile and they go put it up there, it's gonna get moldy. So I don't believe anything. It's just containment of the spores and stuff as they're remediating.
So it's just an issue during the process of being PPE and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not gonna be any additional environmental, EPA handling fees.
That's correct.
Just waste.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not asbestos unless they find asbestos and then.
Yeah, I think it's easily done, that material's done, so. So, yeah, I'm gonna draw on Scott here. Do you have any, I mean, you've been dealing with these types of things for a while and stuff. Do you have anything you'd like to add to help us deliberate what our next step's gonna be?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just blew through the report, because I haven't had much thing. New door in the farmhouse. So.
Well, I'll let you know.
If we have ledge close to the surface that's getting into the building, redoing the building, sort of this idea, because it just kind of reflect the entire building. We'll be looking at the same process all over again. So unless you can keep water, that water coming down the slope, which is on ledge, which the slab appears to be on.
Could Scott move a little closer to the
rebuilding the building, that's gonna be-
microphone?
Can't hear him.
Oh, really? Come on over, Scott. No, okay.
Thank you.
Hey, Mary. Long time no see.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Scott.
So, yeah, basically what I was saying, when you got out of building to re-insulate it, take care of the structural issues, if you're not taking care of the dampness that's getting into the building, you're wasting money. So what I'm seeing from the report is we have water coming down the hill on slab or on ledge, getting onto the slab. Unless you can prevent that from happening and you rebuild the building, there's certain things you probably do to slow it down. But for me, that would be a concern. I mean, you can spray, you could probably do spray foam, which wouldn't really grow mold, but you're not supposed to have that exposed, so you would still have to have some kind of building material inside the building.
Right.
And unless it's, you can't use sheetrock,
No,
because it's just gonna mold up again. So you would have to use like a transit board.
But isn't that where the architect could come in and test it and say, or the engineer, sorry, could come in and say, okay, you just need to do this or this or this?
Yeah, I mean, to have somebody who's schooled in like hydrology to really try to figure out that building envelope, and if there's a good way to get the water away from the building, that would be great, because then you can use the same slab. And I'm not sure the steel structure is okay, is it?
So the structural steel, in your inspection, you didn't find any issues. Is that correct?
I didn't see anything glaring, no. The stuff that we saw exposed, looked fine, but there's a lot of the structure that's covered.
Okay. There's potential. But
Yeah, so for me, getting a good qualified PE and to look at that water discharge coming from the ledge toward the building, and if there's not a good way to mitigate that, I think for the village and the taxpayers in the village to flip the cost of redoing this building, we might be finding ourselves back in this seat a year or two from now with the same issues.
So have you seen, I mean, you've been over there more than I have, but talking to the guys and stuff like that, are you aware of any water is actually either flowing over or?
I didn't see any water getting into the building.
Right.
I know the building was soaking wet.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, as far as the groundwater that we should be emphasizing on right now, I mean, without an engineer saying there isn't, there's no visual indication that water is like coming in that way and flowing into the slab or coming up and up through it. In hydraulics, I gotta believe with my totally redneck engineer mind says that that's not as big an issue as.
not less than the spring right under the slab.
Right.
Right.
And so you can epoxy the top of the slab to set up a vapor barrier, because that slab probably doesn't have a vapor barrier. It's just a steel structure not meant to be used as, I don't want to use the word living space, but a living space. It was used for equipment only, not to be heated. We basically took a steel building that didn't have proper ventilation, anything, and slammed insulation into it and said, voila, we have an indoor building. And that's, I think many steel buildings in Vermont go through this with water building up between the steel and the inside insulation because it's not tight. But I think a lot of steel buildings that I've seen in the past, you could pull back that foam layer, especially up on the roof, and it'll be damp, if not dripping wet. So, you know, yeah.
I was just going to add, Troy did note that in the spring, if there's a big snow melt, that there will be times when water does come through the wall actually onto the slab. That's when there's been a lot of snow melt.
So there may be ways to mitigate that. They could pin the ledge, pour concrete, burn right into it, use hydraulic cement to make sure that there's no water that's going to be coming from the gap, to have the water move around the building instead of through the building. I'm not really sure how much that would be for cost. I do know there's been a lot of chatter between the town and the village for using the industrial park. My concern is this has been going on for a while. We have had a consultant's report from the state of Vermont through the WorkSafe program, referred to as VOSHA in the report. We were getting notice that this could create an immune response within some of the workers. We sort of own that. So if we delay this building from occurring, we could shoulder a potential allergic reaction, including asthma, up to asthma, depending on who the individual is. There's no pills or permissible exposure levels for mold spores. There's nothing on the books because it's such a hard thing to try to figure out. Everybody's got their own immune response gig that's going on. It just depends on the human being and how much mold spore and endotoxins they're inhaling for what duration could trigger it. Some people can deal with it without an issue. Some people can have a short-term exposure and have an immune response that's not reversible. So when we talk about going to the industrial site, that's years out. Years out. And it's a pipe dream that people don't think it is because there's no infrastructure. It's a trail. So we need to figure this out, or I can say this now, the trustees need to figure this out really quickly because we have employees who are in that building and using it.
So Meredith, the third building down there, that was a log pole. Is that, now that's a jointly owned, currently used by both village and town, or just the village?
Nope, it's jointly used. We basically split it
Both.
right down the middle.
Okay.
I know that,
Okay.
Scott is making very, very important points. Troy's strategy has been to keep the employees out of that building as much as humanly possible. I know, when they start using the winter equipment, multiple times a week, something will break that needs to be fixed. And I think to the extent that they can, they're going to try and work out of the lower building. It's a little tricky because tools are up at the upper building, but he's going to do whatever he can to keep employees out of the garage as much as possible and relocate efforts to other places. But they're going to try and make use of that other space, to the extent
As
that they
far as
can.
doing a temporary. Yeah. So as far as, getting the equipment and the tools that need down there to work out of that building until we get the solution, would that require an okay from the select board to be able to let us, fully use that space down there until we get this issue resolved up there?
If you're saying to just use our half,
No, I'm saying let's get the guys out of that space and into that lower garage until we can find a solution to make that building safe. And is that would that require an approval from the select board to be able to use that?
well, if we were going to try and take over the half of the garage that the town currently uses, absolutely. I don't think if we were just going to stay within our half that, there's basically a line down the middle and they just stay on each other's, their sides. I don't think so. I mean, obviously we can communicate to them that, the activities there are gonna change slightly, but I don't think it's anything we would need to ask permission for if we're just staying on our half of the building.
Do we have enough room down there for our guys to stay on our half with the equipment and fixing and all that to keep them out of the other building?
But we still be able to keep the equipment, some of the equipment in that.
Yeah,
building.
yeah, just store it.
It's just
Just store it.
Go in
Just
and
to
get
fix
it,
it
come
and
back
stuff like
out.
that.
To work on it down there.
Do
Train.
Yeah,
is Troy?
Yeah, Yeah, Troy is in earshot. He was saying that he'll come over. One sec.
Okay.
Do they have an office down in the other building?
Can you hear me, Will?
Sorry, Troy, before you end the night off. So I just got a couple of quick questions for you. I mean, I'm familiar with what we call Station 2, because that's what we use when our fire station burned. So it seems like you guys have got access to one bay and the town is using the other bay. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and the office upstairs, now is that something that is being used as an office or being used for storage or?
That's currently being used by the rec department, the whole upstairs area.
Okay.
Well, what about the food shelf? There's Troy, that used to be Troy's office.
Well, we have an office here too.
Yeah.
Meredith's old office.
You know, as far as doing the maintenance, Will, like we discussed, you know, if we, you know, that's full of vehicles down there. I mean, we can move out a couple vehicles if needed and you know, bring our stuff down there as needed. You know, we don't have enough room down there, you know, to set up a permanent shop by any means.
Okay, all right, but there is enough room down there for, you know, whatever vehicle, skid steer or truck, or needs maintenance, some of that, if you can pull that into a safe space or cleaner space and use that to do your maintenance on any vehicle that you need service on, is that correct?
Yeah, that's what our plan is.
Okay, all right, so would it make sense to move whatever tools you need down to that? Is there enough room to go to put your tools that you need to do your maintenance and stuff like that down there? So you limit your time in that building to maybe just going in to get equipment or vehicles. So you're not spending any time in there, totally mess up your schedule or day.
Yeah, you know, it's going to be a transition, no doubt, Will. A work in progress, let's say that. You know, and like I said, I think to do the maintenance and stuff that will work. You know, I guess what my approach has been is, you know, same thing is try to minimize the amount of time that we're in that building, you know, and basically do what we can do in our trucks. That's what we've been doing.
Okay.
So are you gonna be able to make this work, basically, Troy, so we can get this figured out?
We're gonna have to make it work, Kenny. You know, it's not gonna be the perfect situation by any means, but I think we can make it through it. Yes.
So is there a space currently where you can have your meetings and stuff like that, or is that something you're just gonna do? I mean, you know, through the summertime, not a big deal, but you know,
Right, no.
obviously winter inside your trucks at 20 below is.
Right. No, you know, we can either use my office, which, you know, honestly isn't the greatest space either, but it's better than our shop. You know, just if we do need to have, you know, meetings where everyone's together, you know, that close, let's say that.
Okay, that's over at the food
Food
shelf
shelf
building.
building.
Okay, all right, so in that space there, the environment is good. You don't have any issues with the environment over there?
No, you know,
You don't
not to
have any
my
mold.
not to my knowledge, let's say that.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Troy? Okay, thank you, Troy. I appreciate your time, and I know it's your time off and it's your
Yeah,
personal time.
no,
I appreciate
No problem.
it. So I guess to your concern, it's something that he's already taken actions on get the exposure to that, just going into getting whatever tools or equipment they need and getting out.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, what I'm hearing you say is that it could be 5 minutes or 5 hours or 5 months, but I mean, is that,
In the past, when I was sort of doing this more professionally than off the cuff, what we would tell people to do is have sort of a diary. So if I go into the building and I don't have any issues, I don't have any issues. But if I start going into that building and I get the sniffles, that's a red flag. That means I don't go in the building anymore. Because you're trying to stop. The more crap you throw at your immune system, and every time it overreacts a little bit,
yeah,
you get another dose, it will overreact more. So as soon as that starts, it's like you're out of the building.
okay, so as far as PPE, I mean, obviously, we're not talking full, you know, buddy suits and stuff like that, but what would you think, in your experience, be a reasonable precaution for PPE for people who have to go into the building?
N42 mask.
Yeah, and this is where it gets sort of wonky, because if you guys, as the employer, have these employees, and you're gonna say, we want you to wear an N95 to go into that building, you just bought yourself a respirator program. So there's fit testing, there's a medical review
Right.
for each person, and there's a written program. And there's a review from a medical practitioner, not necessarily a doc, it could be a nurse, or even a PA. But you open up a can of worms.
And well, if you don't go to the extent of an N95, you go to like shop mask.
They're not
things
like that. So when you talk about an occupational health issue, if you actually had a workers' comp plan, and somebody says, I'm immune compromised because of this building, it's hard to prove with occupational disease and workers' comp. It's an uphill battle, but if they were to succeed, and they went to you guys, and it was like, what'd you do to prevent this illness? And you said, we gave them a shop vac. OSHA doesn't recognize shop vacs as anything.
No, shop mask or anything.
They're junk, they're not recognized.
Yeah.
So your most minimal that you could do
Is it?
is an N95, because it's got a TC certification from NIOSH, and that's approved for use. But if you give them just like one of these, you know, procedure masks and send them in there, it doesn't mean squat. It doesn't count. You get no credit.
Basically send them in and get this like.
Yes.
So
So that's why, you know, having an employee diary where as soon as you have an issue, you note that down, and you let Troy and Meredith know, or whoever, new village manager, or one of you folks. That's sort of like, oh, so whenever you go in there, your nose starts to run, your eyes start to itch, that's.
Sounds good, okay. The mold and everything, because of the heat and everything.
Mhm.
If you take that right out of it and turn it cold in there again, say because they're working down, and they turn the heat off there and everything. If they're going in now, are they gonna have the same issues with the
Usually
mold
mold
because
issues
it's
start
cold?
to rear their ugly head when you turn the heat on,
Right.
during the spring of the year when the building starts getting warm.
But if it stays cold through the winter and they're going in and out for equipment and stuff like that, and we keep it cold.
And
so it's
Okay.
mediated and removed.
Right.
It's still
It's
there.
an
Okay.
So the
It won't
mold
get
spore
worse.
release.
No, it shouldn't.
is usually built on heat and moisture.
Yeah.
So in the past, where we had a lot of indoor air quality complaints, it was usually this time of year where people turned on the heater. The building envelope got hot and mold spores just blew up, or in the spring.
So the spores, when it's below freezing, let's say, or if winter temperatures, stuff like that, are not as much of an issue. I mean, obviously, air movement, stuff like that can create, you know,
From
any kind of
what
convection.
I've seen over 30 years of doing this type of work, I would say heat is a trigger.
Yeah, so that's what's gonna activate on people moving. I mean, if you turn the heat off and it freezes and you turn the heat back on, they're gonna be back.
Right.
Most of them is gonna consider it there until it's removed.
Right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I'm thinking
safety-
I'm thinking safety wise for the guys to go in and out of there during the winter while they're working in the lower parts. so that
Definitely
building
better for
cold.
it to be cold than here,
Absolutely.
but is that feasible?
Right. I mean, obviously, they got
There's water
bathroom there,
in
some of
there.
that, and that can be shut off and, you know, curb stop type shut off. So that's not an issue. And I know there's a bathroom down and at the office and as well as the lower garage. So that, that could be done, and then.
So in here, they had the prices for the mediation from Davis and a couple other ones. And it was back in 2020. So them prices are not any good.
No.
I don't remember where it was, but
So these are the,
between 35 and 80,000, I believe they were. Is that correct, Meredith?
Yep, that's correct.
So that was Surf Pro, Paul Davis, and one other, I believe.
Yes, GW Savage.
Yeah.
but Meredith, refresh my memory a little bit, you know how I feel about this. Did that include mold testing in their
No.
price?
No,
Okay.
no. We
Because-
told them no on the testing.
Yeah, since you're a relatively new board, mold testing is just a colossal waste of cash.
Yeah.
So you have a fast talking consultant saying, we have to get mold spore counts, bullshit. So if you excuse me, I'm on TV, I keep forgetting that. Sorry. If you look at the Vermont Department of Health webpage under the indoor air quality, and it even talks about testing for mold is not worthwhile. Fix the water issue, deal with the substrate,
It's there, remove it.
and just get rid of it. Right. You don't have to test.
Yeah,
mold,
then
especially
prevent
when
it
there's no
from
mold.
happening again.
Right.
That's how they're gonna.
I think you mixed up with engineering. As
Definitely.
long as Troy and his guys are in another building at this point. I don't know if we should go any farther, maybe talk to the town and about getting a little more space in there to move all their tools and everything down. And just keep it up there for a few months, I don't know, but
Beauty's.
I can say it's out of this area.
we have a meeting with them next week.
Right. Does
So-
anyone want to go with me, we can try on site and see?
Oh,
Okay.
I just have another
Yep.
question. So, Tom?
Yes,
Yes, I got the name right. I feel good.
Better
So,
than
I have a background in this kind of thing, and I used to be a village trustee. That's why I got sucked into it. With your review of the ledge, sort of pouring water down onto that slab. In your experience and your education, is there a way to mitigate that where we could still use the structure of the building to rehab?
I believe that you could still use the structure, but not necessarily as conditioned, heated, occupied space.
Okay.
I don't think that, from what I could see, the water doesn't seem to be causing structural problems. Surprisingly, I mean, I would expected to see some cracks, some stress cracks, some heaves. But I didn't see any of that.
Okay.
so even though it's supposed to be, it was built as a dry building, we kind of go in and tear it down right to the very studs and then rebuild the inside with all of the barriers.
Absolutely, absolutely. That could be done. It's just whether or not, like she's saying, is that we could stop it from the ground first. If it can be drained around, if it can have proper mediation for the waters and not like all up through the slab. I mean, you can build a house in the middle of swamp with proper drainage now. So if that can be done, whether it's worth it to do all that and then find out in the long run it's still coming to the slab, I think is where we're at.
I can't believe it's coming through the slide.
And
Yeah, he just said that the sod looked good.
Yep.
so if it's coming through the walls,
It's been here
occasionally, like Troy
and
said,
heated, and that slab is not cracked, I acknowledge there.
Right.
I can believe that with snow melt, that slab being so close to ground level, that the snow melt's gonna come across the ground and come underneath that steel and then the building. I have no doubt about that at all.
so from what I'm seeing is that there's actually a foundation wall.
But
on it, only on the one side of it. There's not a 4 foot that you know of all the way around. I mean, they built a floating slab, is what you,
That's mine. You wouldn't know until you.
for the size of that building, I can't believe they did that.
Right.
That's, so I would assume that it has a foundation around. So if Troy says the water's coming through the wall, it's not necessarily coming through the wall, it'll be coming through the slab that's poured inside of them walls
I kind of,
from the edge, or over the top of it, correct?
yeah.
So, and I didn't see anywhere on this backside where the ground is above it. I haven't been over for a while, so I can't verify that, but from the pictures, I can see the wall there, and I don't see any ground right up to the steel. So that would suggest to me that it's up higher.
I mean, let's hear. I mean, that's steel on ground level.
Yeah, but you can still see the slab down in underneath it, is what I'm saying, you know what I mean? So either that's slab or wall,
Right.
and if it's wall, and you're coming in, that means it's seeping up through the slab on the edge, or coming over the top of the wall. So that's why I'm saying, I didn't see where it was above the, anywhere.
Oh, there's a slab underneath.
I mean, it's close, absolutely.
I think New York has code that's a.
Well, sure.
Should be, yeah, in general.
Yeah. it's not there.
Right.
Sometimes they don't be good.
That, you know, you get your cement wall and your metal top. I mean, that's.
I can't, yeah, I'm sorry. And I'll go over and take a look too, but I think we definitely need to at least start with an engineer to see if it's possible.
I mean, it's the risk we run. I mean, it's gonna be $1 million to build a new building without 250 and everything else going on. And that's just gonna be the materials and the labor to put the damn thing on. We could be throwing $30,000 into this to find out that we're still a $1 million building.
Yep.
But
But we're also could be throwing $30,000 at it to find out that the $200,000.
yeah, you know, to strip out the inside, put the air, your heat exchanger in, insulate it properly, get the roof vented properly, and maybe 300 grand, and we got a building that's gonna last another 30 years. So we're spending other people's money. Okay, so that's and I'm more concerned about other people's money than I am all of it. If I make a mistake, it's on me. If I make a mistake here, it's on them. So with that said, I'm inclined to try to find an engineer, get a price, so we know, if they're gonna charge us 100 grand to do the job, then I gotta rethink this. But if it's gonna be 20,000 to 30,000 bucks to come over here and say, we'll tell you if there's a process that'll work or a process that won't, I think it's worth the money to try to save, $500,000.
At the same time, we can get one here to give us an estimate on what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
He would tell us whether we want to test this, we want to test this, we want to core the slab, we want to core the ground, we want to core the ledge.
Yeah.
Because when you see the water, 99.9% of the time, that's groundwater. That's not ledge water, unless the ledge is all dry and it's spewing from one spot. So around it.
So to move this forward, I mean, I would be in favor of. You ready to take on another project, Meredith? Or continue on this project? So are you on board with continuing on this project? I personally like to see you try to find an engineer to at least talk to us and go, this is what I would do, this would be the process, and this would be a ballpark on pricing. To move forward with finding out if this building, that site is worth rehab. I think Kenny's on board with that. BJ's on board with that. Steve was indicated earlier that he's thinking the building's a wash and would probably want to move on to a new building. Is that still your stance?
Yeah, that's still how I feel.
Okay, Diane, what are your thoughts on?
So are we still, even if we keep the same footprint, do we still have to do activity? Is that still?
It depends on what we have to do for remediation, right?
Yeah, if we have to do a lot of water work, I believe, but then it's groundwork around it to divert water and whatnot, and we're into it.
Then you're into like 250, right?
But not to the degree of a new site.
Even if you reconstruct on the same footprint, you still have to do activity.
Depending on what we do. I mean, there's degrees, correct me if I'm wrong, there's kind of a degrees on this 250 stuff. You go to a new site, you've got all the stuff to do to it. But if we come over here and we go, okay, we need to build a berm in the back and then rip out all the inside and re-insulate, that's more or less letting them know what we're doing type thing. I mean, it's not as big a process to rehab that building. It would be to build a new one.
Right. When I spoke to, it was via email, but the sense I got was, she needed a little bit more information for me to say for sure, but it sounded like if we were really just, tearing down, some bad, the walls and, putting in new insulation, that could be something very basic, maybe just an administrative, maybe not even an administrative amendment, but potentially administrative amendment. But then if we start digging anywhere, that's definitely a minor amendment, maybe even up to a major amendment, which is a bigger process. So I think, we need, as soon as I get a scope from an engineer in terms of what they would be doing for testing, I'll reach back out to Act 250 to make sure, and the environmental folks to make sure that, we're following whatever process we have to do it properly, given that we know that there is contamination on site. So we have to, anytime we're going to start digging in the ground, we need to check with folks and say, are we doing this properly? Is there any other hoops we need to jump through in order to not violate any rules? But in terms of your question about, working on the project, I think it is going to be a big dollar figure, at least, something over 5,000, I would say. So my thought would be that we would put out some sort of request for engineers to come in and, ask them to give us a proposal. And we'll want to have multiple folks give us their proposals on how they would approach the project and what their costs would be, that we can review.
That's the direction I want to go. So Steve thinks about the wash. Let's walk away from it.
Yeah, and I guess I would like to talk about, you guys aren't in favor of ever rebuilding that whole area so that it's an area where people will want to recreate because of the rail trail and the vision that we have for that area in the Brownsfield.
But is that the only reason you don't want to build there, though?
In part, because I think it's a really valuable spot.
But that's not taken into consideration, as Will just said, about we're not spending our money. Well, actually, we're spending your money also because we're building residents. But that's a lot of on-take right now when everything is going on in price.
Right,
So
I understand that, but I think we also have to.
we have to look at the
We
big
have
picture.
to invest in our village.
Oh, I
don't
agree.
think
Yeah,
we've done that.
I agree.
I don't think we've done that, and that's all I'm saying. And I think it's a really valuable spot. And if we can make it, businesses will build there, I think that's really valuable. You were talking about when you were running that people will want to come here and work.
Absolutely.
And that's what that would do. That's what that would do. And
Yep.
I think we should really consider it.
I think all that could happen with the buildings there myself. That's all.
Pardon?
I believe all that could happen with the existing building that is there.
So this is the map of what the building count home. If you look at where the current building is, right here, I mean, this whole green area is all village and town property.
Right.
So I mean, there's a lot of acreage over there that you definitely look at something to be able to try to enhance the experience in that part of town without moving that.
Now, if it comes down to it, then it comes down to it. But I mean, like I said, I just don't understand that how we could ask the taxpayers to come up with all this money to even start the process. Like Scott said, if we do move over there, we're talking 5 to 7 years.
Oh, Jesus.
And that's if everything went great.
If we had the money to that.
So there's 5 to 7 years down the road, and we're talking 4 or 5 times $1 million, 1.5 we just discussed for a new building over there.
We might be doing that anyway.
Absolutely, but that would be up to the village.
But we want to go through the process and figure out the most efficient way.
So a different spin on this. for redevelopment. If we had the industrial land ready to go, shovel ready, like we convert town and village property where the garages are, you're asking for cash for bad buildings. And this came up at a select board meeting to maybe push the industrial, what do we call this?
Industrial park?
Yeah, the industrial park. One of the select board members came up with maybe we need an anchor building that's ready to go to entice people to come. So when you're putting money into a building and you're trying to bring it up to code and make it a safe building, in the event and when it happens, we can find a different place to collaborate both town and village garages. You're putting on the market a piece of land that has a good building on it. Right? It happens all the time in real estate. You know, we have a dilapidated building. Sometimes we'll just mow it to get people enticed to come and say, well, you know, we have a building that's new and ready to go that we can utilize. That makes the property a little bit more worth it.
Yeah.
Than them coming in and saying, oh God, we got to demo this mess.
Yeah. So we're starting with a negative instead of starting with.
We're starting with a negative site, and if we spruce it up and we have buildings that are usable and have a good use, that are safe, that are up to code, for me, you increase the value of that land a lot.
All right. Yeah, that's another good point.
It's just, you know, real estate people and builders do this all the time.
So I guess we're at a point where you gotta, you know, pick a direction. And it seems to me, Meredith, if you have another direction we could go, one is to explore the remediation of the current building, or we ditch the whole thing tonight and we start looking at a site and we start looking at a new building.
So wouldn't the engineer, wouldn't that be a good first step? Because that would let us know what our options is, because that engineer could say, yes, you could, or that engineer could say, no, you couldn't, and then we go to black and white, which way.
Right. And that's, yeah, and that's what I'm saying, is that we can decide tonight to not put another dime in that building and strictly move on to where it can be built and how much it's gonna cost. Or we can move to check and see what the remediation of that building is gonna cost. So those are the two paths I see.
So either way, I believe we're still responsible to remove that mold and stuff in there, correct?
We gotta do something.
If we're gonna use
We
it.
can't leave it. If we're gonna
use
we
it
can
all.
turn the power off and turn the heat off and turn it into 100% cold storage. We still gotta remove everything that's in there.
Absolutely.
So that's a done deal, which either way, either path we take, we gotta do that.
Yeah, it's whether or not they're gonna strip it to the bare bones to mediate mold. And get rid of it all, and it's gonna be cold storage that way. Because they may not necessarily need to remove everything. They may have a quarter of the building that's the problem, and they do that one area. So that's what I'm saying. So then,
But that's gonna be done, either way.
yes.
So, but what path are we gonna take? Are we gonna look at the option of remediating that building, or are we gonna decide tonight that we don't want anything to do with that building? We're gonna look for sites to build a new building.
I say, and bring an engineer in to at least give us our options. That's my take.
I'm willing to take a motion.
Motion to bring an engineer in to give us our options, to let us know basically what options we have.
This is a building viable.
Yeah.
So we want Meredith to put together a bid. For that to bid, for to have an engineer come in and tell us if that building is what we can or can't do with that building.
Yeah, basically also really look at that groundwater and stuff, and if we can, if there's something we can do.
All right, so Dr. Put words in your mouth. Do you want to authorize the mayor to put up a bid for engineer to do a site evaluation of what it would take to remediate that building?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead a second.
I'll second that.
There's a motion in a second. Steve will second it. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so we have a motion in a second on the floor. Any more discussion? because we haven't really discussed this a lot, but if any other questions or input or thoughts or ideas on this, I'm willing to hear it now.
I mean, I'd just like to clarify to Diane that I absolutely am for bringing in the mind, and me asking you if that was why you were wanting to move the building was not a pun onto you or nothing. I just wanted to make it straight that there's two different ways of looking at it right now. And as Scott said, if that area was farther advanced, we don't have a plan drawn, water runoff, nothing, just to even start it.
Utility.
Oh, absolutely. And just the engineering for that site's going to be an astronomical amount to get through the state and actually good.
So any more discussion about the motion? Everybody understand the
I
motion?
really want to ask Meredith. Meredith, do you think that's a smart thing to do? Is to get an engineer and go that way? Would you?
She wants to know if you think that it's smart to have an engineer look at that site.
Because you've dealt with stuff, a lot of stuff, seen a lot of stuff. And you know the report really well. You know the area really well. You've talked to Tom.
Yep. That's a tough question. You know, I certainly understand going in that direction because there's some potential out there that maybe, like we've talked about, it isn't such a big deal to, you know, divert the water away from the building and solve the problem. I tend to think that it's going to be, knowing that with the existing Act 250, knowing with the new stormwater rules that exist, you know, that there's just a heightened level anytime you start moving water around on a site. So I'm very skeptical that it's going to be a realistic option for us. But I can't, you know, I also have a hard time saying don't do it because I can't say for sure that there isn't a feasible solution. So I certainly understand going in this direction. It makes sense on many fronts. I'm worried that it's not going to be fruitful, but I could be completely wrong about that. I think in talking with Troy and knowing the experiences they've had with that building and the site, it is a very challenging site. I know that if we're going to try and rebuild that building, we're going to have on top of the building costs and rebuilding and remediation, there's also going to be effort with moving all of the operations and materials that are there now someplace else while that building is actually rebuilt. So in one sense, it may be simpler to keep the building where it is, but in the process of rebuilding it, there's another complication versus you were building elsewhere. You can maybe get rid of the mold in the current building, use it as cold storage while the other building is built. So does that answer your question? I completely understand it may be fruitful. It may, I can't say that it won't, but I'm skeptical that it will be. I see Tom has his hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer, if you're interested, I could help you put together a request for proposals for engineering. I have some ideas about what you might want to include in that to make it economical and iterative. So we can talk about that offline if you want, Meredith, but I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. I think that would be helpful. We want a good product, and when we have multiple engineers come in, I want to get an apples to apples comparison. So I don't want, one group say, oh, we're going to do this, and then the other group say, oh, we're going to do this, and they're not the same thing. And so it's very hard to compare the costs. So having a clear set of this is what we want you to give us prices for would be helpful. Diane, did I answer your question?
Yes, we did.
And,
Thank you so much.
and to be honest, this motion is just to put it out to bid, see what it would cost. I mean, obviously you come back with, it's going to cost $1 million if I'm not viable, then we can go, that doesn't make
$1 million for new or $1 million for.
right for advice,
Yeah.
I mean, so this is just to put it out to bid to be able to see what's in the cost.
Okay.
So any more debate, questions, answers? So I'll call the question. All those in favor said motion. Steve?
Aye.
There you go. And chair is aye, it's unanimous. So Meredith, I guess the marching orders are to see if we can at least get a number of what's gonna cost and try to find out if it's worth remediating that building or not.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes.
You're welcome. My
All right.
pleasure.
Yeah. Yes,
Have a good
thank
night.
you very much. Thank you, Tom, appreciate it, and. All right, those are our next steps.
Part of what we're talking about too is we are gonna talk to the guys about going. Yeah, the select board about our guys taking over some more if possible.
Let's you and I meet with Troy. I probably won't be this week, but for probably next week, but I'll talk to him soon, and then we can try to get it scheduled. We'll just meet with him, try to get his. Just
Feeling.
Yeah, his input on it.
Okay.
If that's okay with you guys. Steve, sorry, I probably was mumbling over here this week and set up a time that we can meet with him and discuss. Take a look at the lower building, the log holes are, and find out what they need for space, what we can do to help them try to limit their exposure to that building until we can get a handle on what we're going to move forward. And if you're okay with that, BJ and I are willing to meet with Troy and get his experience and thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right.
You mean a meeting where we all go down there? Or just you and Troy and?
I just thought BJ and I thought we'd just meet with Troy and then,
Okay,
try to keep it to well, three of us meet, we got to call a meeting.
Okay.
So the two of us, we can just go there and get Troy's input on the best way to make sure that we're trying to do the best we can to make sure that we limit their exposure and stuff. And I'll speculate all day, but we want to get a face to face with them.
I'm fine with that. I'll email or text you a couple questions I have.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. Village Growers next steps, we did that. So brownfields funding and needs discussion and action. So with an action portion, I'm assuming that Meredith has a hand in it.
Well, it may not be action tonight, but I wanted to, and I put this in my email, you had a chance to read it. I wanted to follow up on Diane's question at the last meeting about the concrete that's left on site at the former powerhouse parcel. So that does have low levels of PCBs. It has been allowed to remain on site because the site is fenced off and there isn't active use on the site. So it is allowed to be there as it is. But it cannot stay like that indefinitely. So we know that at some point we're going to get questioned by the state or EPA saying, what's your plan to move forward? Because there is more work to be done on that site. The next step in the process is to develop a corrective action plan for the site. As I mentioned, while I was on maternity leave at the end of 2019, the consultants for the project did a phase 2 supplemental report and sort of highlighted what the next steps are. And so this corrective action plan is the next phase. But right around the time that supplemental report came out, the LCPC ran out of brownfields funds. So there was no funds to help pay for developing that corrective action plan. Meanwhile, all sorts of other high priority projects came up. So it just sort of got put to the side and it could sit the way it was for a period of time. And we were hoping that brownfields money would become available again to help pay for developing this corrective action plan. So it sounds to me, based on the conversations from LCPC, that they are going to start having funding available again to fund brownfields projects. So the key kind of first step, though, is my understanding is in order to develop a corrective action plan for the site, we have to say what that site's going to be used for, because if it's going to turn into, I'm just going to throw out wild ideas. If it's going to be a residential development, the work that needs to be done on the site is going to be wildly different than if it's just a place to stop with your car and look at the river. So we need to have some clear direction on how we want that site to be used in the future. Once we have that decision made, we can say, all right, let's develop a corrective action plan for this specific use. And our hope is that we can get funding to pay for developing that plan. Again, because the village is the responsible party, we created the contamination on that site. I don't think that we can actually get funds from somebody else to pay for the cleanup and remediation, but I do think we can get brownfields funds to come up with the plan. So I just wanted to update you. We have a brand new board since all of this happened with the powerhouse, years ago. So I wanted to bring you up to speed on sort of where we're at with it, and that there are more steps to be taken. It was sort of put on hold for a variety of reasons. But Diane's question was very timely, because with the brownfields fund money becoming available, it's now time to make the committee aware that we may need money from them in the future. So I basically at this point wanted to make you aware of that. Okay.
You said it was just for the plan, not for the finished product.
That's my understanding. So
Funding would be for the plan, funding would not be.
that's my understanding. Similarly, the brownfields program funded the phase 1 and phase 2 that has been done for that site. But when it came time to actually demolish the building and move the material away, we had to pay for that. So I think the planning piece, we should be able to get funding for, but the actual work to bring the site to a place where it's kind of done and capped and accessible, people can go on it again, I think that's going to be on us to figure out how to pay for. So I think a big factor in deciding how we want to use that parcel going forward is understanding, if it's limited access, I would think that it would be less extensive remediation kind of work, versus if you were going to like put a daycare on it, then I think that would be a whole different level of work that needs to be done. So
You need access to it anyway.
Yeah,
It's not much.
Yeah.
Right, well, the building was in the river, not really on the land.
Question for Scott, PCBs. Obviously the concrete is showing some levels.
Yes.
In your experience, what typically is required to make that safe?
Pretty much for Meredith, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that would be the removal of the rubble that's left. But there's also some kind of contamination on one of the foundation walls that showed up, the PCBs. And I don't know, that can be remediated by discarding the concrete instead of removing it, because that would be another huge chunk of change.
right.
And then
So
there's the pillar unstable in the river that still is in question. You're going to have a structural engineer look at that to see if we actually had to remove that or if we could leave it.
The rubble that's there, does that have to go to a special site?
Yeah, I would believe the state would be all over that one.
For sure.
Yeah,
Even though it's low level.
yeah, it still is. Yeah.
So we couldn't bury it in the old reservoir.
Well, why do
You
they-
could, but no.
I think
I
that
didn't
there,
get
I was just gonna say, I think there's the potential that concrete rubble that's there could potentially be used as fill if we were going to be capping the area. So it could be sort of a low, bottom, and then you put clean topsoil and dirt on top of it. But that's a potential, and that's the main reason why it was left, because there was that potential. We were facing, I think, about a $10,000 charge to remove it versus the ability to potentially use it on site in the future. So we said, well, let's leave it and in the hopes that maybe it could be used and not pay to remove it if we could use it in the future. So, but again, I think exactly what we do with that site and what the corrective action plan says will determine whether or not we actually have to haul that away. And Scott's absolutely right. There was, I think, an inability to test some of the concrete wall that was remaining. There was concerns about the safety of the people who would be going out and testing it and wondering if it was stable enough. So we need to figure out that piece as well, but there is additional testing that needs to be done.
And so if I can jump in here real quick, because I remember this pretty clearly. the reason the rubble pile was left behind and the building was demolished and taken away, the building was in such disrepair that we couldn't safely test the building.
Yeah.
So EPA said, take it as it's hot, it's got to be containerized and shipped to Michigan. The rubble pile you could actually get on and do samples.
Yeah.
So it's a safer place. And I don't think we would have to, the building itself, because we couldn't test a lot of it, had to be containerized and shipped out to the Midwest for disposal. The rubble pile that was low enough, we could do a land burial with state oversight.
Okay.
So that's why they were pulled apart.
So we could-
Otherwise, it would have cost a fortune.
Right.
Was that based on weight or footage? Because that was based on weight. I can't remember how we disposed of it, but the concrete would have been insanely expensive to move to Michigan and
Right.
waste the cash.
Right.
We could, so the action plan that we might go get funding for the brownfield for could incorporate that plan is to be able to, you know, basically stabilize that on site and make that potentially part of the plan, right?
Right. I think if we say that, you know, we want to just use this, build a nice little platform where people can, you know, have a nice place to sit and drink a cup of coffee and look at the beautiful rocks and falls in the river. And we'd say we just want to stabilize it and make it safe. Then I think they could build a plan around that kind of use.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a beautiful idea. I mean, I'm not talking about the big, you know, fishing wharf that we're talking, the town we're talking about over there, the bend of the river. But I mean, you know, just a hard surface and a freaking picnic table and a guardrail. And I think that would be a nice little overlook that close to a covered bridge. Get people to park safely, because we have, you know, not frequent, but we do have accidents, people coming off that bridge and stuff like that, because they can't see because people are parked. So you get an area where they can actually get away from the bridge a little bit, have a park, throw a picnic table. Like, I think that's gonna be a lot.
This is the other house.
Yep.
And I think it needs that.
No. Liability is just ridiculous and stuff like that. And like that, you can step down and you got, this would be washed away. Perfect.
Yes, I mean, but you need steps to go down lower, right? You're gonna not have it level with the road, are you?
If you have sets to go down lower. It also depends upon whether we require for stabilization and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's what that means. So, I mean, I think as far as this topic goes, we'll just keep your ear to the ground, Meredith, and the brownfields and stuff like that, and see if we can work on getting a plan to remediate that site and hopefully use the concrete that's there as a base, and that we at least get a plan and just step forward that we didn't have before.
I mean, don't we have to give the plan?
Well, I think perhaps at our December meeting, we could have, you know, warned action item related to deciding on, you know, if we all are agreement that, you know, we just want to go with something very basic as you know, the conceptual idea for the site is that it's going to be an overlook of the river. You know, I think that would be something we'd want to warn so people could, you know, offer a different idea if they felt strongly about it. But say we do come to decision and have a motion that that's sort of the general plan for that site. I think then we could also have a separate motion to seek funding from the Brownfields Committee at LCPC to fund a corrective action plan in support of that potential use. So I think that's probably, and I can talk to LCPC to make sure that that makes sense to them. But I think to me, that would be sort of the next steps.
I like that.
So is that something, I mean, so the funding, as far as you know, is looking pretty decent to be able to do an action plan, or is that something we should wait until there's actual notification that that's available?
Well, it sounds like I looked at the LCPC website and I did not see the note that they have under the Brownfields Committee is that it's still the same one that was there 2 years ago. Like the funding's gone. We're not taking applications right now. But my sense from the last conversation we had with them is that they're anticipating that there is going to be money available. So I think it'd be good to sort of get on the radar that, hey, Johnson's got this project and potentially a project at the talc mill site too. So don't give all the money away to other people.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I had some contact with Seth, the
Yep.
LCDC guy, and he said, they may have resources to help develop a plan for the site.
Okay, so you want to make that motion that if it becomes available, then Meredith can act on it. We can authorize it tonight.
Sure.
Go ahead,
I authorize,
make a motion.
I make a motion to authorize Meredith to talk to Seth,
All right,
to make
LCDC.
a plan for the site at the powerhouse.
About
That
to,
sounds good.
about to seek funding for an action
To
plan.
have resources to help develop a plan for the site at the powerhouse.
That sounds good. And I do think, like I said, we should probably put something on the December agenda about the use of the site, just to not make the decision without having people be able to weigh in on it.
Right.
That
We have a
sounds good.
second on the motion to, okay, we got a second. Everybody clear on the motion to authorize Meredith to seek funding for a site plan for the powerhouse bridge site? Makes sense, everybody? Any questions? Debate? All those in favor signify with an eye.
Aye.
Using an eye, chairs and ayes, it's unanimous, so. Boy, we're wrapping up your time there, Meredith, tonight. All right, I think we got one more update on Bill's manager search.
What happened?
He didn't want the job anymore.
After I got his email, I advertised on 2 more sites, the International City Managers Association site and the mock jobs, and I haven't received nothing.
Meredith, you mentioned in the past that Websa could possibly advertise your old position for us.
Thank you.
Have you
Yep.
heard anything? I mean, I know we didn't say, Meredith, would you look into that, but I didn't know if you.
Nope, I did. I sent the job ad to BEPSA, and I know they've put it on their website. I don't know if they've done any other like push of it. At one point, I know that they were putting stuff out saying, multiple BEPSA members have positions open, come to our website and see all the available positions. I don't know if they've done that recently, but it is up on their website under careers.
Perfect. All right. Does anybody have any other brilliant ideas to try to?
So we tried LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Indeed, yeah.
7 days
Yeah.
per week, and using Citizen twice.
How many interviews does that make that we've actually had?
You had none.
I mean, that we've actually
Tried to do.
tried to do.
But we
We had 4 with that one guy.
Right, It was 2, but
2, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we reached out to 4 applicants and they've all, not sure, but they've all declined.
I've even known a couple of people that could possibly do it with the utilities training, and I'm trying to get. Not working.
So other than status quo, keeping what we're keeping at, I mean, anything?
What else trying? No, we're still in 7 days.
No.
It's
that was
outside.
expensive too.
Should we try a more distant?
I mean, some of these things we're in are worldwide,
Yeah.
I mean,
So, yeah, how much more distant? Yeah.
I mean, with Indeed, I mean, it's just,
And you did do 7 days?
Yes,
Yep.
we got nothing.
Okay, well, that's the update.
Want to wait until the first of the year to do some more advertising?
Yeah.
So the only concern I've had about that is, salary, with the way it's going, I think that's gonna be our biggest downfall to it.
It's too low.
Unfortunately, I think that's why we're not getting them enough.
Without a pretty, they get money somewhere.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
where we're at.
But then we also do that salary thing, because we're also talking about trying to do somebody for grants too? Isn't that why we did that salary a little lower?
Well, we did, because that was the starting,
Yeah.
it wasn't really lower, it was more a matter of, if they're working 40 hours, you get X amount of hours. Parents was only working 30, then it's.
Did we
Yeah.
put an amount on the advertising?
The first one we did, which was a little misleading, and we still didn't get anybody. Well, I mean, other than leaving it where it's at right now and hoping someone decides to take it, I mean,
Meredith, you haven't reconsidered yet.
What'd you say? I didn't hear ya.
Said you hadn't reconsidered coming back, yet, have you?
No, I haven't.
we haven't reconsidered getting.
That's right.
Okay, well, thank you for keeping with us, period, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, or that's any other business, anybody wants to bring up? You haven't really brought up,
No.
okay, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Seconded, all those in favor signify by an aye.
Aye.
First,
Night.
all right, chair dies, unanimous. I'll go.
Good night.
Thank you, Meredith.
Trustee.
Tell Troy thanks for his help tonight.
I will.